Hi, Year 11. Hope you're all fit and well. This screencast will hopefully show you what you're going to do during today's lesson. Now, if you remember on, when was it, last Thursday, we were looking at the topic of globalization, right? So what I need you to do is go into your OneNote, open globalization, and you will see this page. You can see the learning intention to explain the increasing level of global interdependence and the need for sustainable development. There's the syllabus statement that we'll be studying. Describe and explain the process of globalization and consider its impacts. And this is something we will be developing after the half-term break with a case study. But for this lesson, you're looking at using a range of terms to describe the process of globalization, describe the role of transnational companies and technology in driving globalization. And you're going to start to look at the advantages and disadvantages of globalization and then refer to the impacts of globalization at local, national, and global scales. Now, these two here are going to be further developed with the use of a case study. As per usual, you have the link there, which takes you to the Firefly page. What we did I think it was last Thursday, we started to open up this topic with a starter to identify some of the global brands, which you did really well at. I think most of you actually got every single one of them. We discussed, why that was the case, like why you were able to easily identify these global brands. Then we watched a short video on globalization, and you were just bullet pointing some of the economic, social, and political areas of globalization. And then the last thing we did was to start interpreting sources. So the first source we were looking at was the England football suit of the 2016 Euros, and the different countries which were actually connected in the production of that suit. I'm not sure we got onto this one, so I think this maybe is your starting point. I want you to look at that source. I just want you to look at it and read it carefully, read all the information, and give your interpretation. What is that actually showing? What you think the concepts of that source are? I'll give you one clue, and that the fact that this sort of like leads to the idea of the shrinking world and concept known as the global village, which was developed by somebody called Marshall McLuhan. Okay, next thing is you've got a definition of globalization. All I want you to do there is to highlight some of the key important words which are important in defining globalization. I'll give you an example. You've got a process, and we have international, and that's as far as I'm going to go. You decide what are the important terms in there in defining globalization. The idea behind that is that you remember a definition for globalization. That's only one definition of globalization. There are numerous definitions. What you might want to do is actually just Google another definition of globalization and see whether there's another one which you prefer. But anyway, there is a definition there for you, and I'd like you to just highlight, underline some of the key terminology which is connected with the definition of globalization. The next thing to do is to watch this video. Now, this guy in the video is brilliant in terms of as it says, crash course in world history and globalization, but the guy does go through very, very quickly. So if he's a little bit too fast for you, just watch it on half speed. But what I'd like to do is just take some notes there on globalization itself. Think about when globalization started, and how it's sort of like sped up, particularly over the last sort of like 40-50 years. Okay, next thing to do is you've got two sources. I'll go through this when we go back in class, but I want you to look at and have a guess to think, okay, well, what is this one showing and what is that one showing? It's rather difficult. I'd be interested to see what you actually come up with that. Then you're going on to explaining globalization. So we've got some information there, and if you go to the Firefly page, let's just go to the Firefly page a moment, because all the information is here. Remember that I skipped that activity. You don't need to do that. And I skipped the choropleth map activity. By the way, that source there is very good. You might want to put that into your OneNote as a way that globalization, how does it manifest itself? How do we see globalization? What facilitates globalization as well? What allow it? Some of those are connected with what allows it to happen. So here for this one, what you do have is you have some, some nice links which you can use as a starting point to fill in that template. Okay, it's not, there are other sources of information which you may wish to Google. That's entirely up to you. But just to help you, there are some links there as a starting point. Okie dokie, let's just go back to this. Now, when you've done that, when we are moving on to looking at transnationals, remember we call them transnationals in geography. Some of the other subjects might be using terminology such as multinationals. Have a read of that. You've got a link there to a nice web link. Let's just see if that works. Yes, it does. That's lovely, isn't it? And yeah, there you go. You got some nice information on TNCs there. Very useful article for answering those questions. I'm just going to go back to the OneNote there. So you just got some simple questions. What's a TNC? Define it. Give 2 examples. We've already discussed numerous examples of TNCs. Some of them, we even discussed right at the start of this lesson. So you've got that question there. And then you've got summarized the different ways in which TNCs can be seen as the major drivers of globalization. So that's technically looking at how important are TNCs in driving globalization. And then we have a lovely little categorization task whereby you use a color key to categorize these statements below. So, you've got the classification is positive and it's negative. So you might want to use one color for positive. You know how to do this. Highlight it, right click, and then decide on your color. But you might want to go a little bit further. That's entirely up to you. You might want to decide whether some of these positive or negative, whether they are connected with social negatives or positives, or economic or environmental, not environmental negative in most cases, but you decide. Okay, you think about it. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fantastic. I'd really like to see that, but I'm just also happy if you just identify the positive and negatives. And the idea with this is for you to build up your knowledge and understanding of the positive and negative impacts of globalization. Okay, the last thing to do in this lesson, I'm confident that you can actually do all this within the hour and 15 minute. What I have set you is a Firefly checkpoint quiz, and it's based on this topic. So I have set that as a task in Firefly. And what I would like you to do, I think it's just there actually, is it? Yeah. I've set the task already. I've set it for today. And all you've got to do is go into either your email to access it, or you can go into your task in Firefly, and it's a multiple choice. It's just 11 marks there. The first one actually is multiple choice. The first one is actually a definition. So I want you to try and do that from memory, to put in your own definition, or the definition you remembered from the lesson, and then the rest of them are basically quite straightforward multiple choice questions there. So 11 marks in total. And that's about it. Should you be super quick with doing that, then by all means go on and do some revision for your trial examinations. Okay. And then we will move on after the half-term break. Okay. So if I am available at any point, I will check in with you to make sure that you are all okay. But if I don't, I would just like to wish you a lovely half-term break. I want to thank you for being such a great group this half-term. Even being on CSL, your work ethic and your attitude has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed teaching you, and hopefully we'll be back in school sooner rather than later. Take care of yourself, and speak soon. Bye-bye.